figure stands in shadows deep, his empty eyes and midnight hair, his torn flesh and rotten teeth. Listen now and hear his tale, a murdered man risen in grief, a hunter whose blades never fail, a tale that ends in a dark lord's defeat. How can it be that this demon should stand beside the kings of old? This man, though rotten and beaten, stands up to fight the enemies of old. Rain pours and the night darkens as Kellam sits, perched on the edge of the towering, weathered building in the collective. As he sat, a weight pressed down on him. There was an ache in his soul, a familiar, empty ache. His dead gaze wandered over the worn stone at his feet, the same spot where he'd first met Kyath and Silliman, where it all started. He thought about the crown sitting on his head, the lost pride of Vothtar. He took off the crown, its weight familiar in his hands, and turned it over, studying its gleam in the fading light. For a moment, he contemplated throwing it into the night, far out of reach. It was a relic of everything he'd lost, of Silliman, of Omethung, of a life that could have been different. And yet, the crown was also the means by which he kept his hunger in check, something they would have wanted him to hold on to. Just then, the voice of the crown echoed in his mind.
You contemplate your desire to fight hunger, caught between duty and despair. What causes this contemplation?
Kellam tosses the crown up in the air, catching it with his psychic arms, causing it to hover in front of him.
I grieve the life I lost, but doubt how I should respond.
Kellam's fist tightened around the crown.
All you have left is this power and an ambition to succeed.
No, all I have left is this cursed body that clings to life when all I want is peace.
There was a long pause, as if the crown were carefully weighing its words.
Perhaps there is a way to bring you peace. A path to unbind you from this undead existence, if that is truly what you desire.
Kellam glanced at the crown, skepticism in his empty gaze.
How would we even begin to do that?
You must reach Mortov, the realm of the dead. There, perhaps you may finally release this hold on life. But Mortov is distant, and you would have to travel far to Rithmalad and beyond.
A thin, smirk-like facial expression creeps up over Kellam's decomposed face.
Lucky for me, all I've got is time.
And with that, Kellam set out, his journey carrying him across desolate lands and through restless, shadowed places. Eventually, he found himself at a bustling port, slipping unnoticed onto a ship bound for Araikur. He thought of Kayeth, who he could have sought out in the city, but the weight of his task settled heavily on his mind. He had a purpose now, one that needed all his focus. After a grueling journey, the ship finally reached the shores of Araikur, a land in the midst of rebirth and change. Kellam stepped onto the desolate sands and made his way, his footsteps silent as he journeyed toward the murky shadows of Rithmalad. The air grew heavier as he reached the town's edge, its stone streets worn from the passage of countless travelers. He snuck into the city like a wraith, moving between shadows until he stood alone in the gloom. Looking around, Kellam takes in a painfully dry breath as he prepares to ask about the next course of action. But his breath is cut off, as beneath him the ground starts to glow a deathly green color. A magical whirlpool flows into existence below him, pulling him into its swirling mass of conjuration magic. Then the green magic subsides, and Kellam finds himself at the end of a long passageway underground. Kellam travels down the tunnel, and eventually it widens, leading him into a cavernous room, a haunting sanctuary that bears the mark of ages past. The space holds an eerie reverence, as if it were once sacred. At the room's center, an ornate pedestal rises from the ground. Upon it, 3 skeletal hands reach forward, fingers curled as though they were meant to hold something precious. To one side, a stone table lies stained, a deep black residue hardened onto its surface like a silent testament to some dark ritual. He scans the walls as he notices the carving etched into the stone, images that stir long-buried memories of his life. One of the images shows Vothtar, fierce and unyielding, his cruel blade descending upon Odlana, a moment that changed everything, that led to Kellam's own dark transformation. Another carving shows legions of undead, shambling hordes pouring through cities and towns, leaving ruin in their wake. And then the most familiar memory, Vothtar's crown being lifted from his head by Ode, severing his reign and sealing his fate. Kellam's hand instinctively touches his own head, feeling the cold weight of that same crown now resting upon him. After observing these images, he notices a doorway at the back of the room, leading into a smaller chamber. Filling up most of this room is a statue of Vothtar himself, his figure immortalized into stone, frozen in an eternal sneer. Below the statue is an inscription carved. Death remains. Death will never die. Kellam shakes his head at the somber declaration. Reaching up to the statue's head, Kellam draws one of his less important daggers and hacks at one of its horns until it falls off. He chuckles in his mind at Vothtar's new look before turning to walk away. But as he turns to leave, his gaze snags on something at the edge of his vision. Along the walls are letters, faint but clear, forming one unmistakable name.
Kellam Van Klyne.
As if awakened by his voice, the statue of Vothtar begins to shift, grinding back into the wall with a low rumble. And in its place, emerging with a grim finality, is a statue of Kellam himself.
You see the legacy you hold, and the one you have to claim.
I will not become Vothtar.
It seems you did not understand me. Your legacy does not need to be like his. You have the opportunity to be a catalyst of change. Never before has there been an undead with the ability to fight his nature.
You ask much of me. I'll do it.
Go, place me on the pedestal in the main room, and I will open the gateway.
Kellam walks out to the side room, refusing to look at his statue again. He walks toward the pedestal and takes the crown off his head, and with a ghastly exhale, Kellam places the crown on the pedestal. The skeletal hands that form the top of the pedestal creak as they move to grasp the crown. A dormant power awakens in the crown as it's placed on the pedestal, causing green flames to burst from the tips of the crown and dance around Kellam, coating everything in sight with fire. Then, just as swiftly as it had erupted, the flames vanished, leaving behind only a dense silence and a gray valley. Around Kellam is the cold, bleak land of Mortov, Vothtar's kingdom of death. Kellam's gaze drifts around this new sight. His eyes scan the vast, desolate landscape, a barren wasteland, cold and gray, stretching endlessly under a bleak, sunless sky. The silence is soon shattered by sounds rising up all around him, low, guttural groans and muffled cries, the despairing weep of lost souls, and the echoing, angry screams of the damned. The noises swirled in the air, a sorrowful symphony. As Kellam strides through the wasteland, he notices that the groans and screams seem to come from large craters in the ground. Kellam approaches one, and looking in, he sees the horrific sight of rotten undead trudging around. With all meaning lost in death, they walk aimlessly, reflecting on the wickedness of their past lives and mourning their inability to see the light of Ode. As Kellam looks upon the pitiful sight, he remembers the crown that rests on his head. Maybe they can serve his cause. Focusing on the undead below him, he forces his will upon theirs, dominating their fragile minds. And standing up straight, Kellam lifts his arms.
Rise, O punished ones!
Then, a new symphony of undead voices rise. The zombies from this crater and the many craters around Kellam start to climb up out of the pits. The undead gather around Kellam in obedience, a great army of dark souls gripping to rotten bodies. Kellam leads his new army to one of the dry, rocky hills nearby, and from the higher elevation, Kellam looks out, his gaze falling on the distant castle shrouded in black clouds and surrounded by a moat of flame, Vothtar's palace. As Kellam looks upon his old master's abode, he ponders his choice. At his request, he knows that the crown can free him of his undead curse. He could enter eternal rest, finally free of his rotten flesh. He looks at his hands and their withered form. He could be free. But then Vothtar would remain unhindered. His desire to be free is great, but his duty to defy the Lord of Death is greater. He clenches his fists and grabs Argenton, pointing the dagger towards the Dissim castle.
I'm coming for you.
Kellam and his army make their way across the wastelands of Mortov, Kellam drawing in more and more undead as they march toward Vothtar's castle. Then, reaching the gates, the great war for Mortov starts. Kellam slashes through hordes of undead as he makes his way to the throne room. The doors of the throne room fly open, and Kellam dashes in, now standing before the great and terrible Lord of Death, Vothtar.
Look who came back.
Vothtar rises from his throne, towering over Kellam.
Don't you know that I am the Lord of Death and the Master of Undeath? Your continued existence is because of me. Only I can take that away. And when I end you, I'm going to take back my crown. Then I will accomplish what Kavroch could not.
No, I will not allow that. Your evil has persisted far too long. I will end you and become what you should have been. You've allowed me no other purpose.
The two great powers of Mortov spring into combat, Vothtar wielding his great sword, Vathanado, the deathly flame, and Kellam wielding Aurum and Argentum, Aurum's silver gleam representing the strength and resilience of Ubo, and Argentum's gold shine representing the great light of Ode. For many years, these two lords of Mortov would clash. Vothtar was not able to strip Kellam of his existence, for Kellam had nearly matched Vothtar in power and mastery. Kellam's legacy lives on, though his actions were never recognized in Odlana. But the people there were kept safe, oblivious to the great warrior, engaged in an eternal battle, Kellam Van Klyne.